This is, of course, a very special occasion, the great solemnity of the Assumption of Our Lady. It's a holy day of obligation, as you know, and I commend you all for being here tonight and for not only checking off the box, if you will, of fulfilling the obligation, but much more than that, for leaning into the mystery a little bit more deeply, the mystery of our salvation, of our redemption. And in this case, the chapter of the mystery, which is the mystery of the Assumption of Mary. And it's so good, it's so solemn, as the name implies, solemnity, but so great that it deserves all the bells and whistles, right? So the incense and the nice vestments and all the rest. It even calls for 2 seminarians to join us. So these are the 2 young men that are here with us tonight, Ian Wilnard and Nathan Ribb, 2 of our seminarians. And perhaps many of you have met them before or corresponded with them through letters, and I know they're very grateful for that. So please continue to do that, and especially continue to pray for them. They actually have interviews through Solemnity Radio, through their podcast that you can listen to. I encourage you to listen to this, not only to get to know these guys a little bit better, but by doing that, you get to know the Lord a little better, because they do a really wonderful job at describing these realities of our religion, of our faith, of receiving God's love, and of that being unpacked in our hearts and in our lives. And you can find those by doing a YouTube search, Salt and Light. That's the name of the radio station, Salt and Light, and then plug in their names, Ian Wilnard and Nathan Ribb. And they're about 40 minutes or so, and they will be really worth your time. But here I want to ask this question, and it may seem unrelated at first, but I'll try to connect this dot. If we think about our desires and what it is that we long for, what it is that we're striving for, do we think that we desire too much or too little? Or more specifically, if we think about the fact that we're sinners, we're descendants of Adam and Eve, and we've inherited this fallen condition, do we as sinful men and sinful women want too much or too little? And it might seem that from the church's perspective, that the church wants to tell us that we desire too much, that our desires for too many pieces of cheesecake, or for sleeping too much, or for indulging in too much television, or whatever else we may wrestle with, that desire for the too much of something, or the inappropriate fulfilling of that desire in one way or another, is the church wagging her finger at us saying, you desire too much. You should train yourself to desire less. You should train yourself to limit what you desire and to learn to be satisfied with lesser things. That may seem as if sometimes that's the church's message, especially when she speaks about morality and about controversial issues. And I want to propose, being drawn by Our Lady in her Assumption, that the opposite is the case. That the church doesn't want us to settle for these things because these are too much, but rather because they're too little. They're not enough. We want to grow in our desires and orient our desires to desire more, not less, more. To not settle for these glittery things of the world, but to learn to desire the Lord. And here we find that it is the Lord that satisfies our desires. Our desires for things here in the world, yes, but finally our desire for Him. That's what's underlying all of our other desires. Saint Therese of Lisieux, the great saint, she said this, that God asks not for a perfect work, but for infinite desire. See, we settle for our finite desires, and we try to fulfill those, and sometimes we do those at the cost of our growth in holiness. So the misdirection here isn't that we're desiring too much, but rather our desires are too finite. We have to shift and move towards the infinite desire, which can only be satisfied by God, who is the only one who is infinite. And as we start moving in this direction, we start to realize that this is humbling. It's humbling to recognize that I can only be satisfied by God. And it's good to be humbled. This is why we proclaim in the Magnificat again and again, "My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord." This is, of course, Mary's great song as she received salvation. "My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord," as she receives the incarnation, rather. "For he has looked with favor on his lowly servant." See, his lowly servant, that's Mary. "He has scattered the proud in their conceit. He has cast down the mighty from their thrones and has lifted up the lowly." And here's the line that matches, that fits well with what I've been saying. "He has filled the hungry with good things." So to tap into our hunger for God, then God can fill that hunger. And this is how Mary lived every moment of her life, from the moment of her conception until the moment of her assumption. There are these great dogmas of the church that are required to be believed in, but not just with an intellectual assent, "Oh, I assent to that, I believe in that," but rather to be leaned into these dogmas that Mary was immaculately conceived. She was conceived without even the stain of original sin. That Mary is the mother of God, not just the mother of Jesus, but Jesus is God. Therefore, Mary is the mother of God. That she was a perpetual virgin, the dogma of her perpetual virginity before, during, and after the incarnation. And finally, the dogma of her assumption. And this is not a new dogma. It was declared as a dogma in 1950. But the understanding of Mary as one who was assumed into heaven goes back into the early centuries of the church. We have, for example, around the year 350, an account from Saint Epiphanius, where he says, "Like the bodies of the saints, however, Mary has been held in honor for her character and understanding. And if I should say anything more in her praise, she is like Elijah, who was virgin from his mother's womb, always remained so, and was taken up, but has not seen death." And this is, the last point there is something that the East and the West, they like to dispute with each other. The East likes to emphasize that she did not die, that she went into a dormition and was taken up into heaven. We in the West, we tend to lean more in the direction that she did die, a sort of death, but not that we define that dogmatically, but rather that would have been the end of her life, was a death. But in either case, after her death or after her last sleep, she was assumed into heaven, body and soul. She holds this unique place in the history of salvation. And the church holds this up for us as a dogma, as in you have to believe this. This is how Pope Pius XII, when he made this declaration, he defined it and he said, "Hence, if anyone, which God forbid, should dare willfully to deny or to call into doubt that which we have defined," that Mary was assumed into heaven, "let him know that he has fallen away completely from the divine and Catholic faith." So this is not trivial, and this is why the church holds this as a holy day of obligation. We have to come to Mass and participate in the offering of the sacrifice and lean into the mystery of our salvation. But why is this? Why is this important? What does it matter what happened to Mary at the end of her life? Whether she was buried and had an end to her life just like every other Christian, and then we're waiting for her resurrection at the end of time, and at that point her body will be in heaven. Why does it matter if we believe that, or if we believe that she was assumed at the moment of her death, body and soul, into heaven? Is this just so that we can, beat up Protestants with our arguments and to say that Catholicism is true? No, of course not. It's for this purpose. It's to preserve, to highlight, to exalt our relationship with her. She is not like every other person. She was immaculately conceived. She became the mother of God. She did this while maintaining her virginity perpetually. And at the end of her life, she was assumed body and soul into heaven. So now the same Mary who went through all of that with her body and in her body, these things happened in her body. God became man in her body. It can't be any more material than that. The same body is now in heaven. And because it's in heaven, it's here with us. It is no longer confined to the boundaries of space and time. It is now accessible to us. Her body and her soul, Mary in her fullness, is accessible to us every moment of every day. We do not have to wait until we die to be with her. We can be with her now, and we can enjoy her motherhood. We can go into her womb in a spiritual sense and join Christ in her womb and have the life of Christ from his conception until through his death and resurrection. We can accompany Christ in that life. And this is our path of sanctification. And so now if we begin to live this life, now just naturally or organically or consequentially follows that our desires begin to be reordered. It's not something we can create for ourselves, something that we can muster up for ourselves. No, this happens by leaning into the mystery of God and leaning into the mystery of Mary. And as we do this, now Mary begins to develop the life of Christ in us. And Christ begins to develop the life of Mary in us. See, we've heard, maybe anybody who's been involved in apologetics or has listened to Catholic Answers, you've probably heard somebody say something like, in a Catholic defense, say something like, well, Mary never keeps us to herself. She always takes us to Jesus. And that's true. But the reverse direction is also true. Jesus doesn't keep us for himself. He always takes us to Mary, to his mother, because he wants us to have a mother. He doesn't want us to go through this life alone. And now Mary can develop the life of her son, just like she developed it in her own body. Now she can develop the life of her son in us. And this is our faith. This is our religion. And now with her, we can be assumed into heaven. We can be brought to heaven. Not in the same way that she was. I mean, I suppose it's possible. God can do that if he wants. But most likely, we'll die, and then we'll be buried, and then at the resurrection, our bodies will be brought to heaven. But this reality begins now. We can be beginning our own assumption. We can be brought to heaven with Mary. Just like Jesus came for Mary and saved her and brought her to heaven, and he did this mysteriously at the moment of her conception. But just like this happened for Mary, he came to Mary and saved her and brought her to himself. He will do this for us. He will come and he will save us. What we are invited to do is to do the same that she did, which was to say yes.